Muy buenas tardes. Les doy la bienvenida a otra sesión de Por Confirmar, este ciclo de reflexión, de debate y de formación en torno al teatro a partir de la pandemia del COVID-19. Este es un proyecto en colaboración con Teatro UNAM y el Festival El Aleph de Ciencia y Arte, con la generosa participación del Centro Universitario de Teatro de la UNAM y Descarga Cultura UNAM. En realidad, estos meses, a lo largo ya de 4 meses, nos hemos dedicado a revisar en diversas mesas redondas, en talleres, lo que significa para la creación, para la crítica, para la gestión, para la programación, para la curaduría y para la docencia, lo que estos tiempos inciertos nos traen. Y sin duda, uno de los espacios donde encontramos que hay mucho por pensar, mucho por crear y por recrear, es en el de la educación. Y es por ello que esta tarde me da muchísimo gusto tener el honor de presentarles a la doctora Nisha Sajnani. Ella es directora del Programa en Drama Terapia y del Laboratorio de Teatro y Salud de la Universidad de Nueva York. Su trabajo explora la improvisación, la memoria, el cuidado y el lugar. Es editora de la revista Drama Review, fundadora de la Alianza Mundial de Dramaterapia y presidenta de la Fundación para las Artes y el Trauma. Está afiliada al programa de la Universidad de Harvard en Trauma de Refugiados y fue miembro de la Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. Yo tengo que confesar que descubrí a Nisha gracias a la curiosidad indómita del gran Juan Meliá, que un día me mandó un mensaje en WhatsApp diciendo: acabo de leer un artículo maravilloso, tenemos que encontrar a esta mujer, tenemos que hacer que participe del ciclo de Por Confirmar. Y gracias a Twitter y a las posibilidades que nos permiten encontrarnos en distintas latitudes en medio de una pandemia global, es que logramos tener a Nisha esta tarde. Y creo que algo de lo que más me emociona de lo que estamos a punto de escuchar es que, revisando los escritos de Nisha, creo que su pensamiento funciona como un bálsamo y como un tumbling. Como un bálsamo porque nos permite mirar nuestras heridas para empezar a sanarlas. Y por otra parte, como un tumbling, porque creo que es un gozoso trampolín que nos ayuda a recuperar el juego y con él a recuperar su enorme poder de liberación en un tiempo que sin duda ha estado lleno de angustias y de miedos, pero también de muchísimos hallazgos. Entonces, gracias Nisha por estar con nosotros esta tarde. Y solo quisiera, antes de cederle la palabra, recordar que a lo largo de la conferencia de Nisha, si ustedes quieren comentar algo, si ustedes quieren hacer preguntas, les invitamos a hacerlas. Al término de la conferencia tendremos un espacio para preguntas y respuestas en donde yo estaré leyendo lo que ustedes puedan compartirnos en nuestras distintas redes sociales. Así que, sin más, los dejo con la gran Nisha Sajnani.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so much for the honor of that wonderful introduction and for inviting me to address you today. Like some of you, like many of you perhaps, I was also very much caught off guard in the middle of our spring semester this past March, when we rapidly and imperfectly had to transition all of our embodied encounters onto this flat screen. Week after week, we tried to meet each other from our altogether isolated or perhaps very crowded spaces from the shoulder up, with inadequate Wi-Fi coming in and out, coming in and out. Like you, I was confronted with the question that perhaps we had once only theorized about. What is theater without a physical encounter? What kinds of bodies are present in this space, in this environment? And how can we adapt our hands-on technical, embodied, and imaginal work into this space? What is lost? What is in fact not recoverable? Indeed, the theater as we have known it has an uncertain future. And after these many months, many of you have met these constraints with creativity. I have heard and seen remarkable audio soundscapes. I have seen visual poetry, even excitement about the technical possibilities of blending theater and film in this medium. Indeed, our technical colleagues who were once perhaps in the background are very much in the foreground now. Your skills are needed more than ever. Of course, the changing face of theater was not the only uncertainty that we have had to face during this past year. Rather, we've had to question our own physical safety when picking up our groceries or when sending our children out to play. Going for a walk or picking up the mail carries a certain risk. We've had to contend with the deep existential questions that come with sickness, the anxiety of loss of employment, and perhaps strangest of all, the breath, the very breath of others. To borrow a phrase from a recently penned essay by Judith Butler, if we did not know before that we share the surfaces of the world, we do now. Each surface bears the ghost-like traces of the other. The risk of contagion presents a threat, but it also opens up opportunities to care for each other in ways unseen perhaps since the last pandemic, the last major crisis. And this leads me to what I want to share with you here now. I propose that theater making offers us a model of care in uncertain times and in times of crisis. But first, a word about uncertain times. When have we ever been without some degree of uncertainty? As the Buddha reminds us, change in fact is the only constant. Uncertainty is the only thing we can be certain of. The world is unstable. We experience this instability in many ways, and I'm just going to speak about three. First, we experience this instability, this uncertainty in our bodies, for our bodies present us with an uncertain future. Our bodies keep changing. What did not hurt yesterday hurts today. I woke up this morning and my back hurt. It didn't hurt yesterday. What is that? Why is this happening? What may have been flexible may become rigid. What feels rigid may become flexible, or perhaps we may feel stronger where we felt weaker. The body keeps changing. Our eyesight might change over time. We may not be able to hear as well as we once could. We may have been in an accident that changes our mobility, or that may change how we see ourselves. We may develop cancer. We may contract COVID-19. Our bodies will die. We do not know when. We do not know how. This uncertainty may bother us. It may bother you. It certainly bothers me on some level. It bothers many of my students, especially those who were already concerned about the vulnerability of their bodies or the bodies of others in private or public space. Secondly, we experience uncertainty, instability in our relationships. We may fall in love and feel the rush of excitement in the presence of the other, or perhaps apprehension. Or conversely, we may go through a painful breakup, or a divorce, or experience harm at the hands of another, perhaps somebody we once trusted. What bothers us most about other people, in the words of Jean-Paul Sartre, is their freedom. Their freedom and our own presents us with a dilemma as much as we value it. It also presents us with a dilemma because the other is unpredictable. Our children, our partners, our neighbors, our friends, they may do things that we do not want. And to some degree, we accept this. Of course, we accept it. But there are probably moments when you may have wished to have a little more control over another. If only they would do it this way instead of that way, I would be happier. If only we could mark these borders and prevent the flow of people. Certainly, we have discovered all kinds of ways over time to manage the distress that arises in the encounter with another human being. In fact, when we imagine vacation destinations, I wonder how many of you imagine a beach or a forest. Often we imagine places without people, just us gazing at the sea, not surrounded by the stress of anybody else, not surrounded by the demands that somebody else may make on us, the demands that another makes through their gaze, the way they look at us, their presence, their voice. Even now, I am placing a kind of demand on you. You may feel like moving, you may feel like doing other things. If we were in a classroom together, you would probably experience impulses to get up and go or move around, but we are also very practiced in the art of suppression. We would not get anywhere in life if we didn't, to some extent, manage that instability, the uncertainty of the moment, and reduce it in order to participate in some kind of social ritual, the ritual of teaching and learning, for example. You may decide, as some of my students have in this environment, that you've had enough of being seen and turn off your camera. I think, in fact, some of us may even miss that feature when we go back to meeting in person for the most part, we may also miss the feature of being able to mute somebody else. This is, particular to this environment. Thirdly, I would say we, of course, experience uncertainty in the world around us. Like last week in the US, we waited and waited and waited and waited for the outcome of the election until it was finally called. And even now, there remains some degree of uncertainty, though it is lessened each day. The pandemic, of course, presents us all with an example of global uncertainty. When will a vaccine be approved? If it is approved, will it be safe? And what about all of the other emergencies that we were managing before this pandemic? The ever-changing climate, police violence, racial injustice, an unstable economy. And then there are the big questions, like, who is this for? What are we doing? Why are we here? I'm probably not alone in having asked those kinds of questions during this time. I've been reevaluating what I value, where I live, the kind of work that I do. Since the onset of this pandemic, my students have also asked me, why is this assignment important? Why should I put my time into this project when there is so much suffering? Crises have a way of forcing change, or as Leonard Cohen put it, there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. And we have an opportunity here, of course, to attend to that light and to cultivate it. I want you to ask yourself now, to what degree this uncertainty, this instability in the body, in our relationships, and in the world around us, to what degree does it bother you? If I were to ask you now, on a scale of 1 being very, very low to 10 being very high, to what degree does this uncertainty bother you? And just note it for yourself. I'd say on most days, mine is around maybe about a 4 during this pandemic, and when I really started to notice its impact on how I felt, how I related to others, it certainly went up to an 8, and it sort of oscillates in there. depending on how much media I take in, depending on how much sleep I get, depending on whether I'm taking good care of my body, and so on. So just note that for yourself. And I'll also ask you to think about how have you been managing it? Because as I said, we've been managing uncertainty since we got here. And we have all cultivated different ways of managing change. So I propose, and I take this from teachings in drama therapy and specifically the work of David Reed Johnson in a body of work called Developmental Transformations, which is an improvisational approach, a highly relational improvisational approach to drama therapy and theater making. I propose that theater and the process of theater making offers us an approach and a model of managing the uncertainty and instability in our lives. And I'm just going to share my screen briefly here. In response to the uncertainty of the realities we are faced with, the theater offers us a world of pretend, a fantastical reality where roles and texts and entire worlds are held together by the will of our imaginations and the care and the collaboration that goes into its development. In these past many months, I have drawn on the power of pretending to help us manage our reality and discover and recover a sense of vitality many times. Of course, there is another side to this as well. Many teachers, therapists, care providers, and family members have shared with me how they pretend to be happy and put together in order to care for others. But here I'm talking about the possibilities offered by the thin veil of dramatic reality. How do we slip into the pretend space? How do we indicate to the other, let's play, let's move into the land of pretend? Do we need each other's physical presence to co-create a pretend world? I don't think we do. I mean, on one hand, we have, I'm probably not alone in having binge watched TV serials and films these past 9 months while sheltering at home. However, for us to be able to truly benefit further, we can use specific plays and roles and stories as pathways to express thoughts and feelings about this time. One play I've often used is Conrad Panganiban's A Cure for the Virus. Although Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot strikes me as being particularly useful these days. Indeed, who are we waiting for? Who is Godot? The world of the play helps us to play with the world. And right now, as we are apart, some of my students are creating their own worlds in their own homes, recording these and piecing them together in a piece that they call A Funeral for 2020. Secondly, the theater and theater making offers us a way to encounter each other. So, in response to the uncertainty of the world, the theater offers us a play space, a land of pretend. And in response to the uncertainty of each other, it offers us encounter, an opportunity to encounter each other. I'm going to play that video again just because it's so delightful. There we go. Just like these puppies in their play, the world of pretend is held together through mutuality, the mutuality of those who participate in it. Puppies let each other know when the other has gone too far. They yelp, they readjust, and they keep playing. Neuroscientist Jaak Panksepp, who advanced the field of affective neuroscience, discovered this in rats as well. He discovered that rats chirp or laugh during their rough and tumble play, and that play deprivation is a potent motivator like thirst or hunger. They need to play, and so do we. Panksepp contends that optimal brain development depends on healthy play experiences in early life, and that even in adulthood and older age, play promotes social bonds and nourishes social learning. Play and laughter help us to discharge stress and help us manage uncertainty because play involves an immersion into the space of discovery with each other. In fact, a recent study by Felsman and his colleagues that came out just this year demonstrated that playful improvisation, in which the degree of variability in exercises is increased incrementally, boosts one's tolerance for uncertainty, capacity for divergent and creative thinking, and lifts one's mood. Unfortunately, play is now increasingly rule-bound and organized by adults and seems increasingly lost in our ever more regulated and litigious society, where too many kids have little freedom to negotiate the social terrain on their own terms, and there aren't that many spaces where adults are invited to participate in non-purposeful play, just play for play's sake. And this is an area I'll be focusing on more in a masterclass that I'll be offering through UNAM, the power of play, even in this environment online. And then there is the body. When we train as actors, we attend to the instrument of our bodies. The details of motion, breath, voice, movement. We practice being in the moment with ourselves and with each other. We practice responding to what we see, what we smell, what we hear. We cultivate rich inner worlds in order to act truthfully under imaginary circumstances. These skills are particularly useful in moments when we feel afraid or emotionally dysregulated. Psychologist Rick Hanson offers us a helpful way of understanding what happens internally when we feel anxious by thinking about our brain in 3 parts. The first part I'll show you here with my hand. This first part here is like the reptile brain. If you imagine your brain like a fist here, this is like the lizard brain. And the lizard brain is concerned with keeping your body alive, and it's concerned with tracking and avoiding harm. This is the part of your brain that is activated when you walk down a strange street at night, perhaps in an area of town that you were told to stay away from, or nowadays when you go to get your groceries and you're just passing people that are close by to you, or perhaps they're not wearing a mask, and somewhere on some level you're tracking, could I be infected? Could this be the moment? There's an ambient kind of anxiety. That's your lizard brain working much more than it's used to working, constantly tracking whether you are safe. And the lizard brain, if you think about it, just wants to be pet, right? It wants to be soothed. How do we do this in the theater classroom? In person or online, we use rituals. We invite people to notice where they are, to notice each other, to breathe together. We have ways of beginning and ending, ways of enrolling and derolling that offer stability and something known in a sea of unknowns. The next part of the brain, it's easier if you look at it this way, the next part of the brain is like the mouse brain. All right, I'll ask you to think about it like the mouse brain. And Rick Hanson refers to this as the mammalian brain, the mouse brain. This part of the brain, like the mouse, is interested in what it needs to feel nourished, what it needs to feel fed. So instead of avoiding, like the lizard brain, it's constantly approaching sources of nourishment. Now, of course, the most direct nourishment we can provide ourselves is good food, but we are also nourished in so many other ways. Our paychecks, affection, sunlight, whatever feeds you. And in the theater classroom, we try to cultivate this capacity to notice what feeds us. Yes, there's food. There's also this moment. There's also the beauty that we're able to create. And training ourselves to notice beauty and to notice awe can provide such a resource in destabilizing times. Finally, this part of the brain here, Rick Hanson refers to it as the monkey brain. So this is the primate brain. And this last part of our brain, this is the last part of our brains to develop from an evolutionary perspective. And it's looking to attach. So if you think about it like this, it's constantly looking to attach to other people, all right? This is the part of us that understands that social networks have evolved to help us manage stress. Indeed, the biggest difference between tolerable stress and toxic stress is the presence of protective relationships and resources. So when we make theater together, we create a sense of ensemble, a sense of belonging. We create a sense of connection with one another. So what we want to do, again, is pet the lizard, feed the mouse, and hug the monkey, right? And one of the ways that we did this recently in my own community of drama therapists and healthcare providers is we invited them to share a little bit of their experience of living through the pandemic and living in lockdown under 5 minutes in their own homes. So using their own homes as their set, adjusting the lighting as they needed to. They had a 5-minute boundary, and they were invited to create something coherent out of moments of incoherence. Over the weekend, 350 providers, healthcare providers and drama therapists and theater artists from 35 countries responded to this call, and I'm going to play you just a short clip of their performances.
Is everything going to be all right? Is everything going to be all right? Is everything going to be all right? Is everything going to be all right?
I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. It's just my bad luck. Not only do I have to freaking perform, but I have to be a decent therapist.
How can we feel safe with you? While you still insist we carry home your centuries-old white burden. Police, our fathers in their state.
Oh, there's so many of you. How have you all fitted on the screen? I didn't expect so many. You know, with this COVID, it's amazing what you can find in your house to dress up in. I love dressing up.
Sarah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. I can hear you okay, but I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing your face.
I miss getting down on the floor. I miss using my body. I miss not wanting to use my body. I miss blushing and sweating and feeling like I'm gonna fart. Now I fart and I just fart and nobody knows that I'm farting.
Everything is great. Everything is grand. I got the whole wide world in the palm of my hand. Everything is perfect. It's falling into place. I can't seem to wipe this smile off my face. Life smells like a rose.
You wanna think about how these 3 cards are sitting in your body. Where do you feel them? And maybe you can share with us a sound of movement, a little sculpt of this interchange.
Chest fully open and feeling just really expanded, kind of looking towards to feeling the sky, whatever. And with all the happiness and all the radiance of the world.
While rings sit in coffins, should we still write our vows? Everyone deserves best days and days to preserve, memories to cherish, but now conserve. Sleep joy. Shh.
those are just a few clips of that time, really simple pieces. And when we asked people what was useful about that space, they responded by saying it was the opportunity to share something about how they were experiencing this moment in an artful way, and to experience a sense of connection with others, being witnessed by others and feeling a sense of connection with others. It's such a simple thing, and yet can get more complicated. It can feel more complicated in these times. The very act of organizing difficult experience into a narrative, into something that we can share with others, is something that we do all of the time in theater. We take the world, we bring it into some communicable form, in symbolism, in movement, in poetry, in song, and that's what this group had done. And this was done in May, and to me it feels a little bit like a time capsule, something we could continue to repeat as we move into an endurance phase with this virus. So in response to the uncertainty that we feel in our bodies, in our relationships, and in the world around us, the theater and theater making and the skills of theater making offer us embodiment, ways of coming into an encounter in a dramatic reality, in a play space, a world of pretend. So to close, I want to say we are surrounded again by uncertainty all the time, and we've developed many skills personally and professionally to manage it. At this point, we have some sense of how we will manage in this particular moment, in this particular crisis. Some have referred to this pandemic as a kind of collective trauma, something that has completely decentered us, decentered our ways of knowing and being and relating with one another. And just like trauma can make the present absent, theater can make the absent present. A quote from David Reed Johnson. In our classrooms, be they in person or online, theater making offers us the skills to manage the reality and the impact of uncertainties on our body, in our relationships, and in the world. And I'm going to leave you with an encouragement to remember your own monkey brain, to remember that part of you that wants to attach to others. In addition to managing our own survival and nourishment, we are social beings that are part of a increasingly global network, and we can reach out to one another to give us a sense of support, especially when we, are facing new circumstances. I know that all of you have been doing that these past many months. I have as well. We have exchanged like never before in generous acts of collaboration and sharing of ideas and tools and skills. As theater artists, as teachers, we also need spaces to care for ourselves and to receive care. Our students pick up on moments when we are anxious as well, and so it serves them and it serves us to care for our bodies, our relationship, and the world that we create and that we are living within, quite literally, in this time. So I hope that some of these ideas contribute to your efforts to help your students feel safe, present, and connected in these uncertain times and in the uncertainty yet to come. Thank you so much.
Muchísimas gracias, Nisha. Es de verdad eso, un bálsamo escucharte. ¿Qué importancia cobra el cuidado en estos días? ¿Cómo ronda todas nuestras ideas? Quisiera compartirte algunos de los comentarios que nos han estado llegando a lo largo de la plática para de ahí pasar a algunas de las preguntas y recordar únicamente que pueden hacernos llegar sus preguntas y sus comentarios en nuestras redes sociales o en el chat de la transmisión en YouTube. Fernando Sánchez nos comenta: no había pensado la potencia que cobra Esperando a Godot. Me hace mucho sentido en estos tiempos. Dolores Hernández dice: mi nivel de incertidumbre en algún momento de esta crisis llegó a un 9. Nadia Almazán comenta: un 10. Claro, como alumna ha sido complicada la resiliencia del aprendizaje a través de lo virtual. Para volver al juego, a la dinámica, necesitamos sentirnos, movernos, olernos, tocarnos. Fernando Sánchez dice, como profesor, puedo decir que he tratado de crear ejercicios con las herramientas de las videollamadas. El entender esta herramienta ha sido en sí el mayor reto. Los alumnos han puesto mucha de su voluntad también. Creo que muchas de estos comentarios y de las palabras que nos comparte nuestros públicos reflejan también la experiencia que tú has encontrado en tu propia práctica. ¿Puedes comentarnos un poco sobre cómo ha sido tu propio proceso y cuáles son algunos de los hallazgos inesperados que te dejan estos meses?
Tell us about that, please.
Certainly. I suppose I love those comments. Thank you so much for sharing your impressions and your thinking in this time. And, you know, I had a moment right in the beginning where I sort of went, oh, I felt completely de-skilled. You know, like all of the things that I knew how to do, how will I ever do them? How will I ever do them, right? And so I participated in every single online group that was happening. I sort of went into a little bit of a manic phase of I must join this practice group and that practice group. And I started to take it all in just as I was going to my kitchen and eating all of my cereal. I was watching things online and going to my kitchen. And that's how I was managing. That must have been the first few weeks in my pajamas, you know, sitting at home trying to figure out how to do this. And slowly I started to discover that in fact there were many encounters that were very playful in this environment. And that the skill of being able to transport somebody into the imaginative realm, the land of pretend, to develop our imaginative muscles was still feasible here. So if we take, for example, the Boalian game Hommage to Magritte, where we are transforming what is and turning it into something else. For example, if I grab this comb, I say to you, this is not a comb, this is a... And then I pass it to you through the camera here, and you grab something else from your side, and you tell me what has it transformed into. All of a sudden, there we go. I see it, Mariana, there. It is not a coaster. It is a little chapeau. It is a little hat, right? And we slowly start to figure out ways of feeling a sense of connection in this space. Sometimes I invite my students to imagine that there's a tiny corner of a bag there hidden in the camera. And the camera's a strange thing, isn't it? I can no longer make eye contact with you. I must look at a tiny hole just above where you are, because if I look at you, it doesn't look like I'm looking at you anymore, right? So there's a strangeness to the body that we have come to grapple with. You know, I asked them to imagine a tiny corner of the bag. Mariana, if you can grab the tiny corner of the bag on the camera, and we are going to pull it back. We're going to pull it back. And now we've each got a little bit of the bag. We are holding one together. And inside this bag is everything we've talked about and everything we've been doing in the class. And I ask students to reach in and to pull out something that they want to remember. It's like a closing ritual. And there are many games that we have started to play by turning the camera off and on, you know, sociometric kinds of games. So it's not the same. I'm not going to pretend like it is. But there is still some capacity to play in this space and new possibilities because of the filters and, you know, this green screen backgrounds, which I know not all of us have access to. In fact, my computer won't allow me to do it, and I'm distressed about that. Yours either. Yours neither. Anyway, so I will say that, you know, practicing play in this space has been the most useful for me, and it is something that I'm excited to share with others. You know, we think in the work that I was talking about in my talk, we think about play as the practice of freedom. And uncertainty can cause us to feel constrained and to return to coping strategies that help us to feel safe, but might not really help us grow. And so, play is a practice of opening up and feeling a bit more flexible despite the circumstance.
Me parece muy interesante y algo que hemos estado nombrando varias veces a lo largo de este ciclo tiene que ver con encontrarnos con nuevas posibilidades de la presencia, que quizá en un primer momento, cuando perdíamos a la reunión de los cuerpos, creíamos que la posibilidad de la presencia iba a desaparecer y en realidad estamos encontrando otras formas de esa presencia. Y me parece maravilloso esto que dices en términos de cómo el juego nos regresa agencia sobre nuestras vidas, sobre nuestros cuerpos, sobre nuestras emociones, sobre nuestras ideas. Y en ese sentido, hay una pregunta interesante de Leticia Ventura. Dice, sé que nada es para siempre, pero ¿cómo generamos confianza dentro de una clase virtual? Y creo que aquí se suman otras cuestiones que a lo mejor no tenemos, en las que no tenemos que pensar como docentes cuando estamos dentro del salón de clase. No tenemos que pensar si nuestros alumnos están al lado de sus padres, si están solos o acompañados, si están siendo escuchados por alguien más. Entonces, ¿tendrías alguna estrategia que pueda servirle a Leticia en términos de cómo encontrar y reconstruir esta confianza en estos espacios virtuales?
Yes, you've raised some really good points, and they're very pragmatic points that I didn't touch on in the talk. But we know that, there's much that we miss from just being able to leave our homes and go into a new environment. Just that action allows us to take our life outside of the classroom and to bracket it and to say, here I am with you, and to pull from it as we need to pull from our lives as we need to. And we know that our students and ourselves, we may be living with children and grandparents and parents and, others who are trying to do school and work from home. And so one of the questions that I would suggest asking your students is, of course, do they have, and I know you have done this already because we are months in at this point, but we've had to do some kind of assessment, right? Do you have a space that's quiet? Do you have adequate Wi-Fi? Is there an arrangement that we can help you make in order to be as present as you can in this space? The other thing that we have found particularly useful, or that I found useful, is creating some guidelines when it's possible. So with newer groups of students who have never worked in each other's presence before, it takes a little bit longer because it's much easier if students have a physical impression of each other. Then the transition to online is much easier, right? But if they're just meeting each other for the first time, I have done a lot more work in the beginning to build a sense of community, which is like trust, right? It's a sense of trust in each other. And so we'll play games like the one I described earlier. Actually, I didn't show you this one, but if I were to briefly show it to you, I would say, Mariana would turn off her camera for a moment. And I would start and I would say, join me if, and then I'll say something that's true about me. Join me if you teach theater, and then everybody in the room who teaches theater, and I'll ask Mariana to come on stage, even if you teach theater or not, just to demonstrate, would turn on their cameras and we would get a sense of each other. And then I would pick someone, everybody would turn off their cameras and they would do it. And if we have a little bit more time, then every time the group turns on their camera, we would invite a little bit of polling, like interview a couple of people in connection to that thing. The other thing I wanted to share is I mentioned the guidelines earlier, but I didn't mention what they were. And I'll see if I can't send them along to Mariana afterwards as a resource. There are some guidelines that our university has helped to create that uses the acronym VIRTUAL, VIRTUAL. And it has to do with giving students the freedom and reminding them that they have the freedom to turn their cameras off or on, because of course the camera gives us, a view into their private space. And that's also something that we want everyone to have a choice about. It's harder for us, I think, as teachers, because it's, we're choosing to say here, you're going to see into my space. And so I've got to choose which environment I'm going to show you, right? And students are making that choice as well, but we know that in some cases there aren't that many spaces they can choose from, and to safeguard their privacy, they should have the right to turn their cameras off or on. You know, there's also some guidelines around if I turn my camera off, maybe I send a message in the chat to let people know, hey, I'm still here. I just needed to turn my camera off. So keeping communication as open as possible to let people know how you are interacting with the community is helpful. We found the chat space to be particularly helpful, both in terms of interaction and engagement, but as a way of ensuring that, you know, even if students' cameras are off, there's a way to respond to what's happening. There's so many ideas. I would love to hear your ideas as well. We can't do that in this format, but perhaps for those who are joining the masterclass, we will have more time to discuss and to actually work with some of these ideas.
Muchísimas gracias. Me parece muy elocuente la manera en la que se buscan nuevos recursos y quizá también se adaptan algunos juegos, algunos ejercicios que todos hemos, de los que todos hemos participado para encontrar otra manera de producir esta confianza. Te comparto que, por ejemplo, en la Cátedra Berman, dentro de este ciclo por confirmar, hace poco hicimos un taller que tenía que ver con el trabajo del teatro sonoro y cómo a partir de estos paisajes sonoros, este juego auditivo, también encontrábamos otro espacio, ¿no? Para entrar a construir confianza, y era maravilloso porque este era un taller únicamente para mujeres, en donde creadoras de toda Latinoamérica, que no se conocían antes, que a lo mejor no habían hecho en ningún momento proyectos que se jugaran en la sonoridad, encontraban con esta herramienta otra posibilidad de, en el juego de ponerte unos audífonos, construir un mundo propio, salir del mundo que habitamos, generar otras ficciones que también pueden ser profundamente potentes y también profundamente aliviadoras de mucha de la angustia que se siente de repente en la concretud de estar en estas cuatro paredes. Bruno Ruiz nos pregunta, ¿de qué manera podemos hacer de los tiempos escolares?
Mariana, I just wanted to comment that, you know, all of us are not coming into the same building, but as an instructor, I have found that just playing a little bit of music, as you just said, invites people into the same soundscape, right? This is, of course, the beautiful Mercedes Sosa, you know, just here we are experiencing the same thing. So starting a class with that means, hey, we're here. We're in this space, right? Anyways, I love that, what you were just sharing. Thank you for that.
Y creo que se conecta esto que acabas de hacer, quizá le da respuesta a Bruno Ruiz, que pregunta, ¿de qué manera podemos hacer de los tiempos escolares espacios de cuidado que atiendan a los tiempos desencajados que trajo la pandemia y a la vez nos permitan construir procesos de intercambio de saberes fuera de lo disciplinar, fuera de lo pesado, fuera de lo tedioso, ¿no? Creo que con este ejemplo que nos dabas justo ahora, ¿no? se abre esa posibilidad. Y sumo a la pregunta de Bruno, Nisha, si nos pudieras hablar un poquito de un concepto que has utilizado en tus escritos, que es educaring, ¿no? El educuidado.
Yes, certainly. So this is a concept that comes to me from a teacher in Australia. Her name's Judy Atkinson, and she introduced me to the concept of educaring, this hybridity of education and care, because care is not just, of course, for the professionals. We care for each other all the time. And in schools, we are being called on to care for each other all the more, right? Because schools are not just schools. They are also childcare centers. They are also places of moral development and social development. And, you know, there are all sorts of things that are taking place in the social. Schools are one of the last spaces we have where we really see a cross-section of society. So I think there's a lot to talk about here with educaring. But one of the ways that I tangibly do this in the classroom is to begin with the same ritual and end with the same ritual. And there's another video I could show you of animals coming to a stream. I don't know if you've ever noticed this on a nature video, or maybe you've seen it in real life. But when animals encounter each other, even if they're drinking water, they're constantly lifting their head up and just sort of looking around. And that's that lizard brain that I was telling you about. It's because at first we need to track, are we safe enough here? And this responds to an earlier question somebody else asked. But when people come into the same room, and by that I mean this Zoom room, and we see all the faces, I will invite people to just take a moment. Let's take a breath together. Let's notice who's here. Right? Let's slow it down. I'll play a bit of music as they come in. I would like to say that I remember to do this every time, but I don't remember to do it every time. I am a completely imperfect being, but I would say when I do this, it's very helpful. It's very helpful to have a beginning ritual and an ending ritual. At the end of class, taking a breath, I would also say that providing opportunities for students to make comments about their experience of this moment is very helpful. Another concept that I didn't speak about as much, but was implied in what I was sharing with you, is the concept of aesthetic distance. And aesthetic distance is exactly what theater offers, that the arts offer us, they offer us a lens from which to share our experience in such a way that we do not become overwhelmed emotionally and still retain some capacity to reflect. So we have a chance to feel more of our feelings and we don't get lost in them. So if we use Waiting for Godot, for example, the play itself offers us a chance to, one, we're participating in the land of make-believe, but then I might ask students, take a line from the play, take a line from either character, and write your own monologue in response to this moment right now. And then they would share those, right? So the dramatic reality helps us play with reality.
Me parece maravilloso porque creo que también algo que genera el miedo es la incapacidad de respirar, de exhalar, de, como decías, bajar un poco los ritmos, salir de esta sensación que creo que es algo que no solo a quienes se dedican a la educación, quienes nos dedicamos a la cultura, hemos sentido en los últimos meses este impulso por producir, por saturarnos, por estar todo el tiempo en acción, porque claro, es la manera que tenemos de protegernos de esta angustia, de esta ansiedad, y de repente llegamos con ello al salón de clases y es importante, como dices, generar esta pequeña pausa, este cambio de velocidad. Aquí nos comparte una experiencia Patricia Leocata. Ella dice, soy profesora de teatro de adultos mayores, a los que se les complica mucho el tema de las plataformas, de estas tecnologías. Cambié el rumbo. Ahora hacen literatura, cuentos, otras dramaturgias. Ha sido maravilloso el resultado. Es decir, jugamos con la imaginación a falta de ese contacto físico, lúdico que teníamos antes.
That is a wonderful comment. I used to run a weekly group for adults who have Parkinson's disease. And we would do a lot of big movements and work with the voice. And then when the pandemic happened, we wanted to keep meeting online. And we transitioned to a writing group. So we would have different creative prompts. They would write, or we would use a text. And then the next week they would come to share that. And we have been working together for the last 9 months like this, once a week. And now they have enough material that they want to put together a play. They want to share it with others. They want to stitch it together. So I think, I marvel at the human spirit. our capacity to take constraint and to discover and new ways of creating in that space. I think that is what will get us through.
Esta capacidad de resiliencia maravillosa del ser humano que se nos ha presentado una y otra vez a lo largo de estos meses. Creo que, y el comentario de Nadia Almazán me lleva a pensar también en cómo reconocemos estos pequeños lutos también que hemos tenido que estar viviendo y trabajando y encontrando espacios. Ya decías tú, citabas al querido Leonard Cohen, ¿no? Para en medio de esto, por la fisura, encontrar el espacio donde entre la luz, ¿no? Nadia Almazán dice: ha sido doloroso el proceso para algunos alumnos universitarios por esta falta del contacto físico. Sobre todo irradia la preocupación, pues es nuestro futuro. ¿Estamos aprendiendo las herramientas necesarias e indispensables? ¿Lo estamos haciendo bien? Creo que aquí se abre una pregunta interesante para no necesariamente los docentes, sino los y las alumnas. ¿Qué pasa con estas personas que estaban a la mitad de un proceso para aprender a hacer algo de manera muy específica en unas circunstancias que conocíamos bien, y ahora se encuentran en medio de este mismo proceso para enfrentarse a un futuro que si bien siempre iba a ser incierto, ahora esa incertidumbre está en un nivel muy exacerbado?
Indeed. All I can say is I'm glad that your students are asking the same questions my students are asking. And you are asking yourself the same questions I ask myself. What is this world? And how shall we be in it? And the things I was training you to do before, some are very useful. You know, embodiment, encounter, pretend, these are all useful things that we take from the theater. How shall we use them in this space? You know, I am so grateful that we have a chance to collaborate on those sorts of questions together, because I can't answer them alone.
Por supuesto, creo que además a lo largo de estos meses, algo que surgía en la mesa que hicimos esta semana con críticas, críticos, curadoras, curadores, era la posibilidad que este momento nos está brindando de encontrar estas otras formas, ya decíamos, de convivio, de presencia, de juego, de creatividad, que creo que bien mirado, y quizá desde un día en donde amanecemos más positivas, que hay otros que también son días oscuros y se vale tenerlos y vivirlos, pero en uno de estos días en donde el nivel de la tensión baja a un 4, a un 3, ¿no? Creo que bien mirado se vuelve también algo que suma, ¿no? Es decir, en estas primeras semanas creo que mucho de lo que se hablaba desde la comunidad escénica era de la pérdida, de la imposibilidad, y creo que ahora, con todos estos meses que ya han sucedido y que hemos atravesado juntas, pues empezamos a hablar de todo lo que se suma, todo lo que va a existir. Sí, quizá en este momento no podemos, en México estamos todavía, y en Estados Unidos igual, en un punto en donde la pandemia no está controlada, ¿no? Y poco a poco acá han vuelto a reabrir los escenarios, pero es verdad que todavía no sabemos cuándo, pero sabemos que eventualmente, ¿no? Ya lo decía por ahí Patricia en su comentario, eventualmente esto pasará, esto también pasará, y regresaremos a estos espacios. Y creo que regresaremos enriquecidas, regresaremos con otras herramientas dentro de nuestra caja, ¿no? Para poner en juego y para saber que quizá las ideas que teníamos sobre convivio, sobre el encuentro, sobre la presencia, sobre las formas de estar juntas, ahora se han expandido, ¿no? Creo que eso es algo que finalmente entiendo muchísimo el comentario de Nadia ante esta incertidumbre que siente sobre su futuro, pero yo lo que le compartiría es que creo que quizá en estos momentos está adquiriendo conocimientos que de otra manera no tendría. Y eso puede ser también una especie de aliciente para seguir en estos momentos en donde la incertidumbre se hace tan presente. Hay varios comentarios que te quiero compartir, Nisha. Tenemos por aquí de Dolores Hernández que dice, a veces pensamos que únicamente los recursos que utilizamos son lo importante, pero hay otro aspecto que es muy valioso, que es, por supuesto, el trato que nos damos unos a otros, el cuidado, el respeto. Y Bruno Ruiz dice que otra cosa que le ha funcionado muy bien en sus clases es abrir un espacio para que las y los estudiantes, les estudiantes compartan cómo se sienten, cómo han estado a lo largo de la semana. Dice, me parece que esta escucha mutua es muy importante. Yo quisiera aprovechar para preguntarte, porque sé que has desarrollado algunas estrategias. Ya hablabas de esta respiración, de este tomar un momento para ver quiénes estamos, cómo estamos, ¿no? Pienso que el juego de la docencia es un juego que a veces puede ser, francamente, pues no sé si abrumador, pero que abarca más allá del tiempo en el que uno está en la clase y que luego si le das chance, ¿no? Se apodera del resto de tus tardes y tus noches y estás todo el tiempo girando en esto, ¿no? Y ahora este juego de la docencia se da en el espacio de lo íntimo, en el espacio de lo que en otros momentos sería quizás tu espacio del descanso, de la distancia. Entonces, ¿qué estrategias, pensando en esto con lo que ibas cerrando tu conferencia, ¿no? La importancia de que les docentes puedan también cuidarse a sí mismos. ¿Qué estrategias podrían tener porque sabemos que no basta con cerrar la computadora, no basta con apagar la cámara? ¿Qué estrategias tendrían para poder tener esta división clara entre una cosa y otra?
I'll tell you two that I use. The first is to take from what we know from theater. When you play a role, you come into that role. You might even costume yourself differently. And by this, I mean you take off your pajamas and you put on clothes as though you were going out into the world. And you're in the role of teacher and you're in the role of student, and you're not teaching from you're not coming to class from your bed, for example, because that's also happened. I mean, sometimes it's the only space, right? So I'm not going to judge that, because sometimes it is the only space. But I do want to say that the lesson from theater that I take here that has been useful in setting the boundary is enrolling and de-rolling. De-rolling is something that I find is not taught enough when it comes to acting, for one, but it's very important to us in drama therapy, because you come into role in order to explore one role that you play amongst the many roles you play in life, right? And so you come into it, and it also means that when you're done for the day, you go back into your resting clothes, and you try to demarcate it in a way so that you can be present in those other roles, the mom, the sister, the friend, all of the other roles that are pulling on your time and that you want to play or need to play. The other strategy I have found particularly useful is I hope maybe in your environment this is not possible. In my environment, it is possible to go for a walk, and a walk in a space that has some beauty to it. Whether that's really just around nature. And there's a whole science to this, right? There are studies that demonstrate that a patient in a hospital who has a view of trees will recover 30% faster, at a rate 30% faster than if somebody who doesn't, right? That your capacity to have access to nature is actually very restorative. And so in what way can you actually change your mindset by doing something else or being physically somewhere else. I know that we are constrained that way. Some of us may not be able to walk too far because of lockdown rules, or because there are too many people, or you're somebody who has a high risk of infection. So it becomes more challenging. But those are just two strategies I have tried. And there's also, I think my colleagues, I think about my coworkers, we have an unspoken rule that, we try not to contact each other unless it's an emergency after a certain hour. But this was before the pandemic as well. But maybe we've been doing a little bit more WhatsApping and texting during this time to keep each other informed. But as much as possible, trying to respect a demarcation of the workday. We need to care for ourselves. If we don't sustain ourselves, we will, really not be able to bring our presence in whatever capacity we can here in this space. I'll stop there. I really appreciate the question, and I welcome ideas around that too.
Me quedaba pensando en cómo este espacio finalmente también está provocando una cantidad de pensamiento que, como toda crisis, convoca al ingenio, convoca a la revisión, al redescubrir, al recrear, lo que en otros momentos, también en una falsa idea de certidumbre, ya lo decías tú en tu conferencia, al final de cuentas la incertidumbre está presente todo el tiempo, solo que ahora no nos deja quitárnosla de enfrente. Pero cómo este tiempo nos ha provocado también el desarrollo de nuevos saberes. Y yo cuando empezaba a leer tus escritos y en HowlRound encontraba varios artículos que me parecían muy iluminadores, me llamaba, por ejemplo, la atención este término del que ya hablamos, educaring, el educuidado, y también me llamaba la atención, por ejemplo, el término de, aquí en México hemos hablado mucho de teatro post-dramático, y ahora esta noción del teatro post-traumático, que me parece también muy relevante. Entonces, quisiera preguntarte, Nisha, ¿cuáles son algunos recursos donde podemos encontrar más de este pensamiento? ¿Cuáles serían algunos autores que a ti en estos meses te han servido para agarrarte de ellos y seguir pensando, seguir jugando?
I will say Mark Seaton, S-E-T-O-N, has written some wonderful work on post-dramatic stress. But it was, when you think about it, it's particularly useful when you think about certain kinds of acting training that place a lot of strain on the body and mind and don't account for students' lived experience, past experience, or their own fear or anxiety, and how that may interrupt learning. And that's a good piece of work. I would say that any of the work that we've written in drama therapy gets at the mix of psychology and theater, and can help us with thinking about sustainability. So I would recommend Current Approaches in Drama Therapy, the book Acting for Real by Renee Amuna, the book Drama as Therapy, Theater as Living, and that is by an author by the name of Phil Jones. And then a book that I have co-authored a couple of years ago called Trauma-Informed Drama Therapy, that brings together relationships between trauma, individual and collective, and theater making, right? What we do in drama therapy. Of course, drama therapists are also licensed mental health practitioners and go through a certain amount of training, depending where you are in the world. But there are various skills, various tools, I would say, that we can draw from this way of thinking that I think are useful in any theater classroom as well, in the context of education.
Maravilloso, muchísimas gracias. Creo que son recursos de los cuales en este momento todos podemos hacer uso. Finalmente, cuando estábamos difundiendo esta conferencia, nos dábamos cuenta que también, independientemente de si se trataba de maestras, maestros, maestres, que se dedicaran específicamente a la enseñanza de lo escénico, sabíamos que muchos de los saberes que aquí se iban a compartir podían ser aplicados en cualquier experiencia docente, y creo que en ese sentido todo el trabajo de la dramaterapia, todo el trabajo que ustedes hacen también desde NYU es una experiencia que puede replicarse con otros saberes, porque a final de cuentas estamos todos viviendo este trauma de la pandemia, que es algo con lo que tenemos que trabajar, que es algo con lo que tenemos que jugar, que es algo con lo que tenemos que gozar también, ¿no? Se nos va acabando el tiempo,
Yeah.
lamentablemente. Adelante.
I think that you ended in a beautiful space, and I just wanted to say I've attended, Zoom funerals in this time, and I know, for students who are planning for Zoom weddings, many rituals that we used to have socially that brought us together, that allowed us to transcend from one state to the next. Victor Turner wrote a lot about this liminal space of going from one social role to another social role, and the need for guides in the in-between. And I think about teachers today as these guides, helping us go from an old state of being to a new state of being. And in between, there's turbulence, and there's change, and there's discovery. And so I would just invite you to approach that with curiosity to the extent that you can, and allow yourself spaces to grieve, spaces to mourn the loss, as well as spaces of joy, as Mariana was just saying, that will, be a balm for us in this time, in these uncertain times.
Hay un proyecto que justo cerró su convocatoria el día de ayer, que implementaron dos artistas jóvenes, maravillosos, brillantes, Isabel Toledo y Aristeo Mora de Anda, y se llama Cartas Sonoras para Cuerpos Celestes. Y lo que hicieron fue generar una contestadora virtual, un número de teléfono, en donde la gente podía llamar, escuchaban un audio que los disponía emocionalmente, corporalmente, a dejar una carta de despedida para alguien que hubiera fallecido durante la pandemia. Y ahora, del 1 de diciembre al 6 de diciembre, hemos logrado que muchas radiodifusoras en todo el país y algunas en internet, lo cual hace posible que se escuche en todo el mundo, vayan a transmitir estas grabaciones, estas cartas de despedida, y habrá personas a lo largo de la República que van a direccionar sus bocinas hacia las estrellas, de manera que estas cartas puedan encontrar de alguna forma y en una metáfora a sus destinatarios. Entonces creo que como dices, ¿no? Hemos tenido que atravesar este momento en donde nuestros rituales de duelo cotidianos están prohibidos, ¿no? Recordaba una frase de un cortometraje que producimos ahora en estos meses que decía, nos preguntaron si queríamos velar a nuestra abuela por Zoom, dijimos que sí, pero creo que a la vez hemos encontrado otras formas, y el arte tiene esa posibilidad de encontrar otras formas en donde la experiencia de estos rituales de duelo pueda seguir ocurriendo, más allá de las limitaciones que la pandemia nos impone.
Sí. Thank you. Yes. I cannot wait to hear those. That sounds wonderful. Okay.
Te enviaremos toda la información, Nisha, y invitamos también a quienes nos están escuchando en esta transmisión. Ustedes también pueden ser embajadores de este proyecto, y toda la información está en la página de la Cátedra Berman. Ahí pueden encontrar cómo ayudar a que estas cartas lleguen al espacio sideral. Quisiera pues ir cerrando. Quisiera preguntarte, Nisha, hemos tocado varios temas que me da muchísimo gusto que podamos a tener la oportunidad de hacer un taller más amplio contigo y poner muchas de estas cosas también en la práctica y en el juego. Pero quisiera preguntarte, Nisha, algunas ideas de cierre.
Well, if I think about the body, the relationship, and the play space of dramatic reality, I would encourage you to care for your bodies, to reach out your hands, to form strong networks, right? And to immerse yourself in fiction and in play, to bring yourself the joy of that dramatic reality, however and wherever you can in your lives. I will say we are together on this ship, and the waters are rocking. The waters are choppy. You could do this with me for a moment. We are rocking back and forth, right? And in moments where the seas get really rough, we may want to reach out and stabilize the ship, but the sea will continue to move. And so we are going to develop sea legs. We are going to balance together on this boat with each other, so that we can find ourselves, hopefully one day, on steadier shores. Though I have a feeling that the waters will never totally be calm. So let's just keep working on those sea legs.
Muchísimas gracias, Nisha. De verdad, una maravillosa oportunidad de platicar contigo, de aprender un poco más de este conocimiento que estamos generando, ya lo decimos en todas las sesiones de Por Confirmar, estamos generando conocimiento mientras caminamos y mientras vamos desarrollando esta posibilidad de pararnos en medio de la marea. Muchas gracias a todas, todos, todes quienes nos acompañaron en la transmisión del día de hoy. Una de las cosas maravillosas que nos permite la tecnología es que las conversaciones tienen un tiempo indefinido. Podemos seguir platicando al respecto de estos temas a través de comentarios, a través de preguntas que nos hagan llegar en nuestras redes sociales. Nosotros tendremos el gusto de poder después compartir con Nisha algunas de sus impresiones. Hay cosas que tardan en decantar, quizá en los próximos días ustedes estén preparándose el desayuno y les aparezca una pregunta o una idea. Nos va a encantar tenerlas también. Por favor, no dejen de compartirnos lo que estos encuentros les provocan. Y les comparto que el 18 de noviembre tendremos 2 mesas más de reflexión, una en torno a qué ocurre ahora con los grandes festivales teatrales, otra sobre qué implica la producción de espectáculos digitales, y el 20 de noviembre tendremos una conferencia de la gran creadora escénica Manuela Infante, chilena, maravillosa, que propone la posibilidad de la creación posthumana. ¿Qué es eso? Les invitamos a seguirnos para seguir pensando, seguir entendiendo qué puede ser el teatro a partir de esta pandemia. Muchísimas gracias por haber estado esta tarde con nosotros. Muchísimas gracias, Nisha. Hasta luego.